I've got Winston Wu here with me. I am amped that you're here, man. We take walks around the park together. We hang out, get coffee together. I see you everywhere, and it's so good to have you in community here with me. And Winston, you've had a long journey of really getting to Colorado. You've been all over the place. You've been all over the world doing stuff, really cool things. Do you care to help everybody know kind of this journey that you've been on? Because you've kind of been in between things lately when it comes to work. And how did you get to where you are today? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so great to be here. So I originally grew up in California and went to school out there, worked out there for a few years in the kind of finance, Wall Street, capital markets sector, and I eventually moved to New York right before the financial crisis in 2008. I was working in that field of where that crisis kind of originated, and I was in New York for 12 years. And what brought me out here is basically during COVID, when COVID was starting to hit New York. It was really when they announced that they were closing down travel to Europe. That's when I was like, look, I don't think I want to stay in New York City during a quarantine. The last time something like that happened was, the Hurricane Sandy situation. And the city was kind of lost power and was shut down. A lot of people went up to the, Upper West Side or Upper East Side to wait it out until power came back on. And so, just going through that, I was just maybe coming to Colorado to ski would be a better idea than to stay in New York. And I was skiing a lot that winter. And so I came out with a friend of mine and ended up meeting up with some friends here and quarantining. And then after that, during the midsummer, I decided to go back to New York and move out here.
That's awesome. Okay, so I hope everyone catches this because you were working on Wall Street for a long time, both in California in the finance sector, but then also in New York City. And that's kind of a lot of people have a lot of questions, myself included, just on things that you've experienced. You were there at the time that people recorded the movie The Big Short, and you knew some of those characters, and you were in the mix in New York City when it comes to Wall Street and everything there. What made you interested in going into the finance sector, in getting involved when it comes to money?
Yeah, so I think growing up, I was more interested in technology and software. Growing up in Silicon Valley in that area, in the Bay Area, we had these computer lab classes, even starting in, I think it was second grade or something like that. And so, which I think back then was kind of not common. And so I was interested in that. I used to, kind of build computers and tinker around with stuff like that. And then when I went to college, I was originally going to major in computer science, but then, I just heard all these bad stories of people pulling all-nighters in the computer lab, and it just didn't sound that great. Although I really enjoyed it. And so I decided to major in business, which I thought was more practical. And what really led me to Wall Street was my brother, he was 2.5 years older than me. He was basically a biology pre-med major, but his senior year, he decided to apply to investment banking jobs. Mostly, I think, because just talking to friends about what they were doing after college, that seemed like a more of an interesting thing for him to do than to go straight into medical school. And so he deferred medical school. He went to Wall Street, worked at an investment bank. And so what opened my eyes to that industry and the opportunities there was when I think I was I was like a senior in high school, and my brother was spending like 2 or 3 months in New York City for what's called analyst training, which is the initial training program, although he was going to be working in the Bay Area after that. And so I went out to visit for the first time in New York City, and I was 18 or 19 or something. I think I was 18, yeah. And yeah, it was just like fascinating. I mean, it's just, going from a place like San Francisco to New York City, New York City is so much larger, right? And there's just so much more going on. And so I think that really just kind of fascinated me in a way. And I was just more like just kind of curious about all that. And so anyways, so when I started getting close to graduating, I decided to go that path as well. And then I interviewed and applied to those jobs, and also went into investment banking initially. Yeah.
So you saw it, it was fascinating, and you moved across the country to join your brother kind of in Wall Street. How would you describe the fascinating part of it? Like, if you can put yourself back there, what was fascinating, whether it be about New York City or Wall Street?
Yeah, so I think there are probably two things. One thing that's more specific to New York, because you can kind of technically work on Wall Street out of
Sure.
like Chicago, LA, San Francisco, but just being in New York, I think everyone talks about the energy there, like the quote unquote energy, whatever that means. But it's just there's just there's these kind of mantras that people say, like the city that never sleeps, or like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And so, there's just this energy in the city where everyone is very like active, like at their best, and are just like, like I guess kind of generically speaking, trying to live their best life, so to speak, in terms of like what they think their best life is, and so so it's just like high achieving, but fun and focused and social, and so there's all these things going on there, and then I think specific to just like kind of Wall Street, there's kind of all these stories. I mean, if you go and watch the classic movie Wall Street by Oliver Stone, I think it was released in 1985. That paints like a really good picture, a very realistic picture of what Wall Street's like, and just like the culture and like how people talk, and the attitudes and all that kind of stuff. And so it just draws people in. I think that's part of what the culture is. It tries to like draw young, educated people into this area, where they can kind of be a resource for these companies. But there's always a pitch, right? And it's like, the pitch is, do you want this like fabulous life, house in the Hamptons, like, which is like the beach area outside of New York, and like all these like fabulous things and restaurants and like blah blah blah, like all these kind of, most of them like pretty like material things actually, and so it just draws people in.
So you got there, and you're kind of drawn in, like you're talking about, drawn in a little bit, and you're a part of it, and you're there for over a decade. What are some key elements or key moments in your path there for those 12 years? What are some key things that happen?
That's a good question. Milestones. So I think, one of the big milestones, I think, in that journey was, so I started off in investment banking, And then I kind of moved into, what's called like the mortgage bond industry, which is kind of where the Big Short and all that kind of stuff happened. And I had gone to this smaller firm, and been there for for about 3 years. And then what happened was one of the largest, most prestigious Wall Street firms in New York, they decided to open up a San Francisco office and go into a new business area, which included, the mortgage bonds and some other things that they traditionally hadn't done since the company was started. And I think it was started in the 70s. And I was just really surprised about that. Anyways, I ended up, it's from a faith perspective, God has always opened up these doors for me in really concrete ways. And so in this situation, I saw the news article. I called a friend of mine that worked at another firm that the article said they were doing business with. He gave me a person's name and email. It turned out that that person used to work with my brother, and they used to sit next to each other. And my brother hadn't talked to him in, I guess it would have been 5+ years at that point. And so or maybe it was 3 years or something. Anyways, and then so I just cold emailed this guy, and I was like, I'm Henry's brother. I don't know if you remember me. I'm working in the same area of what you guys are doing. I'd love to come in and talk to you. And that's kind of how I got in the door. And then I ended up, getting a job there a few months later. And that was it was a big step in terms of just everything. My role there in seniority, compensation, everything I was exposed to and learning. And I started there, I think I was 25. Okay. And it's it was the kind of job that, most people would be late 20s or 30s, something like that. So it was really an accelerating point for me. So that was one of the big kind of milestones. And then the second one was probably when I went to New York after that, because that job was in San Francisco. And then I went to New York 3 years later. And that was just a whole different set of things. Actually, I take that back. I wasn't 25. I think I was 26 or 7. Yeah. Anyways, and then I went to New York. So, yeah. And then I think in New York, it was different because, outside, I would say generically speaking, in that type of investing, outside of New York, most of it is this kind of long-term, almost mutual fund style investment. It's a little it's kind of slower paced. You you invest in things, you hold them for long periods of time. And I wanted to get to New York and be in a more active trading role. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up going there for that opportunity. And that was in the middle of right before Bear Stearns, and then later on that year in 2008, Lehman Brothers going down. And so there was just a lot going on, and it was, we were in an active spot at a big firm, small group. And so I think just the exposure to that style of investing, which I'd never done before or never been exposed to, being out on the West Coast. And then also even just New York City as a city and socially, it's just different, and so it's very active, it's intense, and all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah.
I have a question about the cold email, because I know a lot of people hesitate to send cold emails or to step out into something that they're unsure about, but they want to ask a question or they want to get involved. What are the elements about that cold email? Because that was a really big step for you.
Yeah.
And you tried to warm the email up as much as you could, right? You used your brother.
And I also CC'd the CEO just to make sure that the email would get read by more than one person. So I really shoved it in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but what were you saying? So,
No. That element is really important. What are the elements that you did or thought through that helped make that a valuable piece of a valuable email, a valuable piece of content? What did you do practically to make sure it got seen and responded to?
Yeah, so I started off with the intro, like, the warm intro, like I know you, my brother, all that stuff, and then I basically, wrote like 2 paragraphs, like, this is where I'm at. I've done all these things. Like, these are the number of investments I've looked at. This is what I've achieved. We've achieved with them over the last couple of years. Like, I put really concrete stuff in there, so that it was really clear that what I did already really lines up with what they're building over there.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of the message.
If someone sends you a cold email, what are you looking for that makes you respond to it? Or you're a really nice person, so you probably respond to all of the cold emails that you get. Or if you did get a bunch of cold emails all the time, but what are you looking for in that person?
If I get a cold email, I think the first thing I look for is, like, do we have a mutual connection? Like, if we don't have that, then I think it's about relevancy, right? And so it's very different if someone says, hey, I got your email from so-and-so, even if it's someone I knew a long time ago or someone I worked with 10 years ago, that's still something more than a cold, like, LinkedIn email, for example, right? Okay, so that mutual connection, relevancy, and then I think outside, then the second thing, like, if they don't have that, then it would be, I guess it would be something like, do they come from the same background? Do they work in the same area? So I've had someone that's, like, reached out to me on LinkedIn before that clearly worked, like, even though we didn't cross paths or we had specific mutual friends, we clearly worked in the same area and totally could have crossed paths. And so that's, like, very different too. And so I think those 2 things are probably, and, like, that they know that it's like a very specific, relevant thing that they're asking for. And so someone may cold email me and say, hey, I worked at your old firm. I was there after you left, but I'm looking to make a move here. Could I get some advice on something? That's different from, like, oh, you have some real estate background. I have this, like, real estate software product. Do you want it? I'd love you to take a look at it. It might be useful for you. That second part is kind of like, nah, it's not really. I'm not really going to respond to that, probably.
Yeah, because advice is much different than a product.
That too, yeah.
Which is
more personal too.
Yeah. Which is a big deal. And I think advice is one of the most valuable things that we can get. It's even more valuable sometimes than the product.
That's right.
I think all the time, actually, especially if you can get the right kind of advice. Why do you think most people, or why do you think so many people? I don't know the stats on that, but why do you think so many people stop short of making that email that you made? Have you noticed that? Have you heard this? Have you?
Yeah,
I
think it's about what you think is possible, and that can change over time too. I think for me at that age, I was 26, like turning 27, and it was just like the way I saw it was like, is almost like the stars were aligning in a way that, like, I didn't think was ever possible. And so like I had to try. That's kind of how I saw it, basically.
You just said one of the most powerful things, I think, for any human.
Yeah.
You just went from okay, I'm going to send a cold email to it actually has more to do with what you think is possible.
Yeah.
Now that is a game changer.
Yeah.
Okay, can you talk to that pain point for people? Because for me, what I think is possible, it fluctuates sometimes on how I feel or how things are going, or sometimes when I look in the mirror, what do I view? How I view myself.
Yeah.
But then when I see you or you see me, maybe that's even a better way. When you see me, because you're a friend of mine, I've seen you actually see more possible in me
Sure.
than I even see in me.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the essence of seeing what you think is possible? Like, why is that so valuable? Because yes, stars are aligning. Stars can always be aligning, meaning like
Sure.
everything can always be working for your good. Everything can be working to a place of where the dream is going to become reality. It just may not look like what you think it's going to look like, which is powerful. But speak to that.
Yeah. So I guess when I'm thinking about there's those two parts. There's what's possible and then the stars aligning part. I think in that situation, it was maybe a little more weighted towards the stars aligning. It was a situation where I first saw the article and I was like, this company, everyone's heard of this company, and I was like, I would have never thought there would be a chance that I would be able to work at this company, basically. And it was only that they were opening up this office in San Francisco and going into the type of investment product that I was doing, which they had never done before. And so it just seemed like it was calling me, and I was in the right position. They hadn't even, built a team out yet. And then when I called my friend, like he knew the guy, and then the guy knew my brother. And so as I started moving like I started moving towards the opportunity, it's just like there was like these things lining up even more, right? But even before that, I was like, I just have to try. It's kind of I'm trying to think of the right analogy. I'm trying to think of what the right analogy is, but
I love that though when you say I just have to try.
Yeah.
I just have to try. And then when you talk about movement toward the opportunity, you're moving closer to it. You're figuring more out about it. You're investigating it even more. You're not even saying that you're going to get it, but you're seeing what it would take or what it even is. Yeah. And I think so many people stop short of even like, oh, I couldn't do that. Well, why not? Someone's going to do it.
Yeah.
Why couldn't it be you? Why don't you figure that out first?
Yeah.
Figure out why it maybe not be you. And then on your way to figuring out why it can't be you, you may figure out why it actually could be you.
That's right.
And it's like, you could do those 5 things, oh, shoot, maybe I could. Oh, I know the guy. I'm moving closer to it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm understanding more about it. The more that you understand about it, the more you could see yourself in it and doing it.
That's right.
I mean, that job move for you is it's a door that if you don't walk through, you may not be sitting here.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe it's easy to overthink things and be like, well, these are all the reasons why it couldn't happen or this or that. But I think I don't think I'm really like that as much. Everyone can be like that at certain periods of time.
It's about overthinking,
or just like thinking of reasons why it wouldn't work.
You go towards more the positive side.
Yeah, I would say I'm more of an optimist, right? But it's also, the opportunity was too big for me to think those things. You know what I mean?
What does that mean?
It's just
It meant too much?
Yeah, it's like
Once in a lifetime?
Yeah, it's like a once in a lifetime thing. And like you're either gonna like jump on the train or try to, or you're just gonna see it go by. And it's like never gonna come again. And so like what is it gonna be?
What are the elements of a once in a lifetime opportunity? What is that like? How do you know that?
It's just magnitude, probably.
Size.
It's just magnitude. Like, I mean, in this situation, they were obviously doing this big move, and they hadn't gone into new business like this in 30 something years, and they were putting the article said how much money they were putting into this thing and all that kind of stuff, and it's like a new opportunity. And also, like, even compared to where I was currently at that time, I was coming from much smaller place, like smaller platform, and so the delta between the two was like very large.
Oh yeah, you skipped a ton of steps.
Yeah.
In the theoretical workforce world.
Yeah.
At 25, you're like, man, I'm gonna shoot this shot, so to speak, and I'm gonna see what happens, and I'm gonna jump, and the magnitude and the size and the elements that are involved. It's like, okay, so what if they don't offer me the job? What happens?
That's right. Yeah.
They don't offer me the job. If I don't get it, so what? At least I tried. And how do you help somebody that's not even trying?
It could be hard, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of it is it can be a self-confidence thing, how you look at yourself, do you believe in yourself, all those things. And like those are things that you can help guide someone through, but they have to like walk through it, right? And so it's or it can take a while, but yeah.
When you keep as you keep going, obviously you're learning a ton about finance, money, and Wall Street. What are some correct ways to think about that? And then what are some ways that people think that are like, oh, that's not actually true? I'm just curious because, people that maybe have never worked in Wall Street, or people that don't understand money and how money works, it's like, oh, they think it's, like this movie or that movie or this idea. What are some misunderstandings that people have that you'd be like, no, you don't understand. It's like this. I'm curious about that.
Okay, yeah. That's a good question. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings, or the things that's not really talked about or as well known, like even in some of these movies,
sure,
is kind of like how competitive and those type of jobs are, and the amount of like pressure and performance, and bigger than all those things are like some of the types of personalities you have to work with. You really have to have a thick skin. You have to like not be bothered by crazy personalities, and it's just you deal with a lot of stuff like that in those jobs. That's a lot of what you get paid for, probably, at the end of the day. And it's just very different. It's very that, and then it's very much most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it's very much you got to figure things out on your own. Like, you show up, you can try to ask people questions. They're not really going to have time for you, and you got to figure out how to learn what you're supposed to do there. And if you can't, you're out, basically, or you're not going to survive very long, right? And that, and there's just an adherence to certain like high expectations, you know, and like the amount of kind of sacrifice you're expected to make for the job. Like you're not really kind of allowed to have much boundaries with your personal life and like all these different things. Like the job is like you're at the beck and call of the job, basically, kind of, and so that's kind of how a lot of it is. To give you an example, one of the leader that was spearheading this effort to open the San Francisco office, he is now the co-CEO of the whole company. And the company has grown from, originally it was about, when we joined, it was something like 70 investment professionals. Now it's like 1,000 or more. So just to like put in perspective how much they've grown since. And so the guy who's now the co-leader, I remember hearing a story when the first year he started at that company. I think it was in the late, like the 90s. I think he was married younger, and he saw his family 2 days in the first year of work there.
Wow.
Like imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
Like seriously, I'm not kidding. 2 days out of 365 days.
Wow. So he works 363 days in a row,
or like,
yeah, not in a row, but like just 363 days. Just gone.
But he's a co-CEO now.
And like that's the cost.
Yeah, that's an example.
Yeah. That's an intense example of the cost. And so I think that's a great segue into like there's usually a cost, everything. There's some kind of cost involved in everything and all the decisions that we make and what we go and what we decide to do. It's really interesting because like you chose more life. And how I view you is like you did those 12 years, you were in it, you learned about it, and then you made a decision. But before you made that decision, you had to learn how to learn. Where do you go to learn? Or like if somebody's like wanting to get into Wall Street or they're interested in like the financial sector and you're like, no one will teach you anything, you've got to learn it. What are those elements that take like learning? Because you have to be able to, you found the job in San Francisco because you were reading. Like you were reading an article.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And talk about those habits of learning that you've built up to get you to where you are today.
So I think you have to just be curious and proactive. Back then it was before YouTube, and so I think now you can go on YouTube and find out a lot of stuff, or on the internet. There's just so much more information, and you can ask questions. But you have to. I think perspective is a lot of it. So if you can talk to people outside, like make friends or network, or talk to people outside of your company to try to get some advice and perspective, then people may share with you, oh, these are the things you should focus on. Because sometimes it's just about like, what should I even focus on? Or like, this is perspective, right? Like where do you start? And then after that, there's more specific things to learn. And then you have to know like what questions to ask even to learn what you're trying to learn, right? And then like, where are those resources? And so, back then it was mostly, there'd be these like industry research pieces that some of the banks would put out. Some of those research pieces were called like primers. And so they would like, it would be more like an introduction, like this is how this works. And this is like the definitions of these different things and like all that stuff. And so back then it was more just like reading, like a lot of stuff basically. And so, I mean, I think when I went to that company, when I was like 26, and there was a period of time where I was reading every piece of research I could get my hands on. And I was probably reading like 100 pages a day. Wow. Like I had just stacks of paper, just printouts, stacks and stacks. And like I had a lot of friends. Like I had a friend, older friend, and his apartment was like he had just these bins on these racks of just like papers. Just he must have had like 40 bins on his wall, just on these like wire racks, just like all sorts of paper.
Wow. Yeah. That is wild. So you read 100 pages a day, just of like
probably on average, yeah.
Oh man, how long did you do that for? Like how like years?
Like 3 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I remember later, before I went to New York, one of the other companies I was interviewing at, it was it was this another like kind of crazy story, but it was basically this Nobel Prize winner guy in finance, and he had a hedge fund in Connecticut, and I got connected to them and was interviewing with them, and it started with it was just going to be an hour or two interview. I ended up being there all day till the afternoon, and all the questions they asked me, like I knew all of them because I had read all this research, and it was like very specific, like very technical stuff, and it was outside of the normal stuff I was doing at my job. It was like pretty outside of it, but I just knew it just because I was reading all the research. And that was the only reason why they were like kind of interested in me. But
It's because you knew.
Yeah, I could answer all the questions.
Because you could answer them.
Yeah.
So you have an hour, 30-minute interview go all day.
Yeah.
Because you put in the work and you went above and beyond on a normal basis. I just think there's so much to that, Winston, because myself included, I just think humans, we don't really know what it takes.
Sure. Yeah.
We don't know what it takes to be an expert, or to even get in the door, or to even get in the room of the best in whatever industry you want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of that, does go back to perspective and like, exposure. And again, like just going back to the story of my brother, a lot of it, came from that. I wasn't, I ended up finally getting to, pretty good college, but, my brother was like a valedictorian. He went to Stanford. He got into Stanford, like medical school. He took this. So he was very like high achieving, and I just kind of was able to get a different level of exposure because of that like I wouldn't have normally gotten. You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
It's just kind of like who you're around is like who you like, what you get exposed to a little bit. And so that plays a big role.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
If you can get exposed to things early in life that are positive, that are helpful, or that open your eyes, then you're able to see, back to even something you said earlier, what's possible.
Yeah, that's right.
Your eyes and your dreams and your imagination get opened up to like, oh, this is possible because I've already seen it.
Yeah, that's right.
My brother already did it.
That's right.
So it must be possible because he's already done it. Yeah. And so it opens up this whole new river, so to speak, of opportunity that you can just flow down because it's already been opened up.
That's right.
To you and those around you because you're a brother. I love that so much. So as you're going, you've had this amazing career, and you're not done. You had this amazing career, and you're still working on some things. What would you say that how has your mind shifted when it comes to money specifically? So you're in the finance sector. We've learned a ton about like jobs, and we've had a lot of good conversation. But when it comes to money, what are the 3 or 4 most important things that how you view money?
Yeah, so I think, obviously it's been like an evolution. And so, when I was younger, okay, I think a lot of, I was more like kind of secular back then in my life. And I think a lot of people grow up in different like backgrounds, family situations, and this and that. And I think what happens when you're an adult, you're out there in the workforce and deciding like what you want your life to be like and what you want in life. Those are really influenced by like your upbringing, right? And I think for like me and like my brother, my parents were like always working; they weren't really around. And so I think our perspective was like, we want to get out there, explore the possibilities, and, money to us was, it was part of, I guess, what you needed to do all those things that you wanted to do, right? And like experience all those things and all that kind of stuff, right? And then there are things like what money can buy, and you like nice things and all this kind of stuff like that, right? But I think a lot of that can just be it can be a reflection of like what you felt like you didn't have when you were younger, right? So I think back then there was a lot of that stuff kind of going on, and now I mean it evolved. And what I realized was, money. So first, let's go talk about the definition of what money is. Okay, what do you think money is?
Oh man. Okay. So what do I think money is? I think money is something that we use because we place a value on it. So I think originally, before even we had like currency, what we would do is we would trade.
Yeah.
So this is a form of like I think money is the in between of like getting something of value and then giving something of value to someone else in return for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess I go back to like the trade to help me understand money.
That's right.
Yeah.
So like just to kind of walk through that a little more. So it's a medium of value.
Ooh, I got it right. It's the in between.
Right. But it's also like what, so let's just say you are a carpenter and you had to, let's say you're bartering like a chair that you made. Like what goes into that?
Yeah. So like going to bartering or making the chair?
Making the chair.
Okay. So making the chair, you've got wood, screws, time, and energy and effort type.
Okay, so time and energy.
Yeah, there it is.
Which is labor.
Great.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So
and materials.
But materials.
Great.
Okay, so where did the piece of wood come from?
The tree I cut down in my backyard.
Okay, which is also a result of
planting a tree and farming.
But it's labor too.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Labor. Yeah. Gotcha.
Same for the screw.
Cool.
Right?
Yep.
So basically, one of the economic definitions of money is basically the future claim on labor. Okay, so I have this store value, and it was created by some amount of human labor that I can then hold on to and cash it in the future. Basically. Does that make sense?
Yep,
right?
It does.
And so I think what's happened is there are a lot of society these days. Well, I guess mostly talking about America. I don't know about other countries, but there's just really this focus on money and wealth, right? And so there's this focus on building up of excessive amounts of the future claim on future labor. Okay, and then the question is like, what's the purpose? And so then the question is kind of like, okay, what's one thing to say, hey, I'm a 25-year-old guy. I feel like, I'm called to this mission of, starting these businesses that will do X, Y, and Z and train people and build these products that benefit society and all this kind of stuff. And to say, based on my calculation, I will if I want to start building this in the next coming years, I will need to have somehow raise or have raised saved this amount of money to invest in that to achieve those plans. Okay. Mm-hmm. But it's another thing to say, oh, well, I just want to be wealthy. Right. So it's kind of like in a way, I kind of think there's a little bit of like the future claim on labor with a plan is different than the future claim on labor without a plan.
Oh, that's really good.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
And so, because otherwise so I don't know, that's something to think about. Right. And some people would maybe say, well, I just like to have the option. Like, I don't know what I really want now, but like, I'll figure it out at some point. And then when I do, I want to have the option that like I've already worked hard and I have the money to put towards that. And like, there might be a little bit of that. Right. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, I really think at the end of the day that wealth or money, especially from, a Christian lens or like a biblical lens, mm-hmm. is about being a steward. Okay. 'Cause, you're stewarding this like medium of value, future claim on labor, for a purpose. Right. And that's where things like tithing or giving or investing in things like that's like, that's where I think the role is being a steward, right? Giving, knowing to give where it's needed, right? Or invest where it's needed, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, because, look, everyone is like, there's a mortality and you don't bring the money with you and all those things. And so it's temporary anyways. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But I think, the secular view, it's more like self-focused. It's more like about you and what you're going to have and the house you're going to build and all, all these kind of things. Whereas I think that it's more supposed to be, and this is where like, tithing, investing, giving, it's more like a network that it like, that value travels through this network and you're part of that network. If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
Rather than you just being an endpoint.
No, yeah. I love the idea of like trying to accumulate wealth with a plan versus just trying to accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
What do you think that does to somebody's soul or someone's mind? If they're like, how have you seen money positively affect someone's life or maybe even negatively, just mentally or even spiritually?
Yeah. So one of the things I've seen, I haven't really thought about this a lot, but it's something I've noticed is that, so in some of these jobs I saw this in Wall Street, there are different periods of kind of like, I guess what they call it, like generically is like easy money. So there are different periods in the market where the economy is a certain way and like just the investing and the returns and the activities are just producing more of an excess than they normally do. Right. And I think what I saw when that happened, people would be like out there, like partying, going to these like fun trips and this and that, but it's almost like it just created more emptiness. You know what I mean? And I think there's an aspect of when that money kind of comes too easily, and it's sometimes like people forget about like the value and how hard it normally is to earn that. And then it just like, it turns into them like not really valuing it and then them just like kind of wasting it away. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's what I hear you saying is if we don't if we don't value, if we've never been through difficult times, or we don't plan or go back to your other thing. If we don't have a plan, then we may just waste it.
That's right. Yeah.
Sure, difficult times, good times. You could waste it in difficult times, and you can waste it in really good times.
Yeah.
And you saw it easiest maybe in really good times where people would just be blowing money, so to speak, on things that just didn't really matter or being wasteful.
Yeah.
And, well, that happens if you don't have a plan with the wealth that you're trying to create.
Correct.
Which is back to what you just said. So if I imagine that's a great place for you to begin when you're like coaching or encouraging somebody when it comes to like, hey, Winston, what do I do to make more money? Or what do I do to have more wealth? Or what do I do to get this amount of money? Or whatever. I bet your first step is, well, what's your plan?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to go from here? And so as you think about, let's say you know, there's an amount of money you said, you need to learn how to make this amount of money because it's going to help you get the skill sets that you need to be able to manage and handle finances so that you can keep having more prosperity, be able to give more, be able to use wealth to help others or be a part of a community or to grow or to take care of your family or even yourself. What would you say that amount of money is for us to learn the skill sets that maybe you have or that someone that's a professional would have?
What are the skill sets?
Yeah, what are those skill sets? Or even the amount of money that you would say like, hey, it's important for you to understand how to manage X amount of money. Because by you managing that amount of money, you can learn the skill sets. Or you have learned them.
I mean, I don't think it's about the amount of money. I think it's more just thinking about things more in the right way. And so, for example, everybody, kind of, has a certain amount of income, right?
Right.
And then, like, where is that going? Right. And is it going to the areas they want to, or is it just kind of unplanned? I think what happens most of the time is that people just kind of go with the flow. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, what can happen there is that you might be spending more on kind of like what I call like comfort type stuff. So stuff that comforts you when you're just like having a bad day, and this happens a lot. So it's like, you're in a stressful job, you're trying to make more money, but then you have all these like bad blow up days. And then you're like, oh, I got to go to happy hour and go to this like nice restaurant because I just want to do something that makes me feel better. Right. And then you might find if you actually did your accounting that you literally spent, I don't know, like 40% of your discretionary cash on just like going out, eating and drinking or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you could be spending that on, and like you could literally have like 3 more awesome vacations that with your friends that are more fulfilling and like life-giving, or something like that. Right. And so it's kind of, I think those are kind of some of the things I think about. And the other part of it is like, there's money. So I think what happens too is that people, they do use money, it's very easy to just use money for short-term kind of excitement or feeling better or whatever it is, rather than one, focusing on the things that are really going to give you like long-term, long-lasting fulfillment, which are things like, understanding your purpose better, having deeper friendships, right? And those friendships could be both in like personal or in business, right? Community, they could be They can even be like activities that you just enjoy as recreational, right? Rather than and like really investing in that, and like, a lot of activities, whether it's skiing, fly fishing, or whatever it is, the more you invest in it, the more you get out of it. Because it's like typically like if you're in the learning phase, it's like not that fun, and then when you get into the advanced phase, then it's like really fun and effortless, right? And so if you can get to those levels in like a couple different things, then you're like just having more fun, right? And and so, and and those it's like, it'll be around for the rest of your life, right? And so yeah, so I think it's like the way I would think about it is there's this kind of like short-term investing in things and long-term, right? And I think the money stuff is really good at just being able to get the short-term stuff without thinking or planning. But ultimately, if you can think and plan around stuff, not only are you going to get more out of like who you are as a person or your life, but you also will need less money to do it. Basically.
So help me out with this one, because I think your thesis right now with kind of what you've created and what you're sharing is, what's the plan, right? Like that's your what's the plan? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Help me out with a plan. Let's say I'm paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
And I have, let's say I have an average amount of debt. Okay. Yep. I maybe have a debt on my house, or let's say I rent, and I have a debt on my car.
Yep.
And that's fine.
Sure.
Okay? That's where I'm at.
Yep.
What's my plan? What do I think about? How do I begin to create a plan? How do I create a plan so that I can be self-sufficient, or maybe purchase a house one day? Or how do I work through, what are the questions I need to be asking myself to even get the plan?
Okay, yeah. So I think first, I mean, it's easier to know, like, it's easier to know how much, you make, that. I mean, it's you get a pay stub, and you can just look at it. And then it's kind of, what are your expenses? Like, where are you spending your money every month? That's something that is not that easy to figure out, like in a way where you can see clearly what's going on. There are different tools out there. I use something that's a little more complicated, but there are these free apps like Mint Mobile or whatever, and you just like, you connect your account. You don't really have to create any categories. It'll kind of like suggest. I think they kind of like make suggestions. You're like, hey, just FYI, like you're kind of spending a lot of money here and here, and you can just, if you wanted to, if you have like one bank account, one credit card, you just, get that app, you link it up, you let it do its thing for like 2-3 months or more. And you kind of like look at it and try to understand what it's showing you, right? And then you can kind of start making some decisions, right? Then you can say, okay, my car bill is $500 a month. Okay, I'm putting money there. I want to be, saving up. Maybe you want to save up for a down payment for a house or like a vacation, or both, be able to do both. And so what is that going to take? Like if you want to save X amount in 5-10 years, then you have to create a schedule. And like, but there's also, you're also going to move up in your job. And so you can kind of say like, oh, maybe I should try to ask for a promotion next year, or like every 2 years. Right. And all those things. So you can kind of try to do the math a little bit. And if it's not your skill set, like find a friend that is better at it to help walk you through it, and just like, there are people out there, there are resources. You do have to kind of chase them down if that's what you want, if you want to figure it out, but it's out there. And so that's kind of what I'd suggest.
I love that. I love that you just, I think what's key that you just said, what most people don't do, is you said, hey, before you make a bunch of decisions, you need to understand your situation.
Correct. That's right.
Like, you need to understand what you're actually spending money on, which is maybe the hardest part, is to understand clearly what you're actually about, because we didn't even think about it. Yeah. Often we just swipe the card, or we just buy this off Amazon, or we just press a button and it's like, oh, we just did that. It's fine. And then you don't ever even realize or even think about, hey, how that adds up. And so it does take some understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a key element of the understanding before you make decisions. And you have to understand before you can ever make a plan that's effective.
That's right.
And then we can forecast is what I heard you say next is like,
Right.
okay, now how long is it going to take me to get there based off of what I now understand and the plan that I've created?
That's right. That's right. Correct.
That is really valuable.
That's right. That's right.
That is really valuable. What are as we kind of think about this, and I think this is a really encouraging conversation for a lot of people working on their financial situation or thinking about money or even just thinking about how to do cold emails or jobs. What are some staples that people do not have that they need to have to create wealth that if they have a plan they can accomplish? What are some key characteristics even, or quotes or mindset things that you have built over 2 decades to get to where?
All of it's like discipline, I think also, anytime you're trying to figure out your finances and make some changes, it can be very hard. Okay. It's almost like,
It's going to be hard.
yeah, it's going to be hard. It's almost like changing lifestyle things can be inherently like just very difficult because you're just like used to it. Right. And so, for example, to say, okay, Trevor, you like come down here every day, you drive, it's like 15-minute drive. Okay. What if you didn't have a car and you had to take the bus? Like how hard would that change be?
It'd be really hard.
Right. And then
It's not a train station near me.
Yeah. Or it's like, yeah. Or it's like, what if like for some reason, like, you're used to eating a certain amount of food or whatever, let's just say that got cut by like a third.
Okay.
That's an adjustment.
It is.
Right. And so in a way, I think, changing around your budget and how you do things financially, especially if you're downsizing, it's basically like fasting. Okay. And, if for those listening, if you've never fasted before, I highly encourage it. And, you could just wake up and just wait till 5 p.m. to eat your first meal, or work your way up to that. And then, but anyways, so.
Well, hold up. How have you seen that change you? Because we've talked about fasting.
So it's changed me a lot. So I would say that what I realized, I think I started, getting introduced to like fasting and stuff like that, maybe like 10 years ago or something. And I realized that all these things, even like all the fascination about New York and like all the nice restaurants and like the nice clothes and like, all that stuff, I don't even feel a draw to it anymore. And I really attribute a lot of that to fasting. Because there's something, it's like they call it the flesh and stuff like that. Something where you have these like urges for those things. And when they're in check from like fasting, it's like you just don't have those like kind of just constant or uncontrollable urges for like all these excessive things that like you don't really need. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah, well, what it makes sense to me is, your urges or your wants aren't the things that are controlling you. You
That's
determine what you want. You determine what urges you decide what to respond to, instead of vice versa, and they control you.
Yeah, but most people, they would say like, well, those are things that control me, but it's like influence too.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's just and like even like subtle influence. Right? Even the most subtle influence is still a form of, making you act and do things a certain way. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, and so I just, I just don't have those like urges. Like I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I remember like my favorite restaurant in New York, but it's like, I could just go to Whole Foods and like I'm happy with that too. It's like I don't feel like I have to go there every week or or something like that. You know.
No, I totally get I totally get what you're saying, and then you're not living by emotions either. Like
right.
you're not just a creature of where your emotions control you
Correct.
either, which actually helps you monetarily because a lot of times our emotions affect us in our finances.
100%.
They make us spend and they make us sell and they make us just riding the wave.
Yeah, but people don't really think about it as their emotions are doing that. They just think of it, they would think of it as like, oh, this is just what I like. This is what I'm more used to. But it's actually, there's something underneath all of that, right?
Yeah.
Right?
No, there totally is.
Yeah.
What's underneath it?
It's just, I think what's underneath it is yeah, there's, like you said, there's like some emotional tie, there's comfort, there's like habit, there's all these other things going on that create a bond between you and those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, what I found that you're just totally reminding me of right now is this idea of when you are full, you are comfortable, you no longer really you work hard less.
Yeah.
And less. Or you focus less and less.
Yeah.
And the idea is, I read this book, and I thought it was a really powerful book. It was titled Hunger in Paradise.
Okay.
And when we start settling, we stop growing. And when we stop growing, we stop going to where we really want to go. We stop dreaming.
Oh, yeah.
We stop thinking.
That's quite true, yeah.
We stop becoming. And that's the thing, that once we stop doing that, then the things that we really love start leaving us.
Oh, interesting.
We're not closer to them anymore because we're not growing with them.
Yeah.
We're not working on them.
Yeah, sure.
We're not allowing them to actually be near us and working to be near them. Those can be people. Those can be things. Those can be opportunities. Those can be purpose even.
Sure.
And so it's just really, I think fasting is really powerful because it keeps you, it actually allows you to feel hunger.
Yeah.
And if I can feel hunger, then I can understand like, ooh, how can I use this?
Yeah, sure.
And man, I think it's a powerful thing, specifically for Americans.
Yeah.
And for us being in America, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
When it comes to finance, when it comes to money, when it comes to just your life, what is something what's a question that I should ask you that I haven't?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean,
I know. There's so many, and maybe it's like this. Maybe the question is this: Where are you going?
Where am I going?
Yeah, what's next for you? What are you thinking about? What wakes you up in the morning? What keeps you getting after it, working on the things?
You know, I'm kind of the type of person. I'm always kind of thinking about like ideas or solutions, and like I like to fix things and stuff like that. And so sometimes, like, if I don't have a lot going on, I'm like doing stuff to my house, like kind of fixing something or whatever, improving something in some way. And I think where I'm going, I mean, with my career, so I kind of took some time off. I've been in a transition for a little bit, and I was kind of working on something more recently, but it didn't really pan out. And so I think I'm probably going to go down, or at least, part of what I'm going to do is look at doing some sort of consulting for businesses, but where there's also a kind of like spiritual coaching element to it. And, some of the things can be talking about some of the stuff we just talked about, but there are other things too. And so I'm kind of trying to, I think I'm like halfway through figuring out what that looks like. And so I'm trying to figure out the rest of it. And I guess the way I would describe it, I have a lot of friends in business. Some of them I don't, interact with as often just because I'm not as much in that world as they are. And some of them, come from faith background, some don't. It's kind of a mixed bag. And I think what happens is, when you don't have if you don't have things like spiritually figured out in your life, and, you go down this road in life and then you start having family and, there's just more responsibilities. There could be more pressures, and figuring out how to balance all that stuff, I think, can be challenging. And even with work, some people, like, they hit a plateau, or they've been at a place for a while and they don't really know how to grow more from there. And it can just be this, like, dry place, right? And I think what I realize is that I can help, like, a lot of my friends in business and maybe some of their friends and, like, other people, like, figure that out and just be more fulfilled and be more alive than where they're currently at. And so there's something tied into all that, and I'm kind of processing through some of it. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that because you've done, decades of really intense work, and now you're still iterating.
Yeah.
Your future is bigger than your past still.
Yeah.
You're still working toward this idea of, like, there's more out there.
Yeah.
What's the most, and kind of as we bring this conversation to a close, what is the most challenging thing that somebody can wrestle with, that you think is, like, important for them to wrestle with? Or maybe a challenging thing that you're wrestling with.
I think the most challenging thing someone can wrestle with is, what's the right way to put it? Their worst fear, basically. And I think people's worst fears are different. But there's a reason why, if someone has a worst fear, there's reason why that's there. And I find, as you get older, at some point it's going to come to a head and you're going to have to face it. And that's a part of growth, right? And that's part of opening up the doors to probably where you're supposed to be headed, but you might not be able to get there until you face it, right? And I think for me, that was, I was after I kind of moved on from, like, the Wall Street side of things to, like, more entrepreneurial stuff. I was in a business with a friend of mine, and we ended up with a disagreement, and it turned into this, like, kind of legal thing. And I almost went bankrupt through that whole thing. And to do that, after a successful career at, like, arguably, like, the prime of your career too, and all that stuff, was, like, very kind of, like, difficult thing to kind of go through and swallow, kind of. And so, but, I had to go through that, and I had to face it, and, it's, and you come out the other side, and life goes on, and you grow from it. And so, I would say it's probably that,
I think that's really powerful, and I think that's really important for all of us.
Yeah.
What's your biggest fear? Let's wrestle.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to wrestle with. Man. Winston, thank you so much for letting me be able to capture one of our many conversations on the podcast. So good to have you, man.
Thanks for having me.
You're going to have a great, I love where you're headed, and I'm excited for it. I'm here for it, man.
Thanks.
I really do appreciate you. You speak life into me all on a regular basis. You're always encouraging, and I really do feel like I have a friend that I can turn to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
When it comes to you. So you guys find somebody like Winston. keep leaning in to the plans, understand where you're at. And I love the idea of like, hey, there's opportunity.
Yeah.
Like maybe grab somebody around you that has bigger dreams for you than you have for you. That may be an actual friend. So do that. And that's kind of what this is really about in the behind the scenes. So hope you guys have a great day. Full Vantage Podcast. See you later.
See you later.